Imagine this. You're sitting across from someone you care about deeply, a friend, a lover, a parent. You've just bared your soul, revealing something raw and unfiltered, something you rarely put into words. You've said exactly what you mean, or at least you think you have. You wait for that moment of recognition, that flicker of understanding in their eyes, the silent exchange of, "I see you, I know you." But instead, what you get is a misunderstanding so sharp it feels like a betrayal of reality itself. They nod politely, they smile vaguely, or worse, they react in a way that proves they've heard the words but missed the meaning entirely. And in that instant, you feel like a ghost in your own life, seen but not truly known. How many times has this happened to you? How many times have you walked away from a conversation feeling as though you spoke in a foreign language no one else can decipher? How many times have you wondered whether you are fundamentally unknowable or whether everyone else is just blind? Now imagine this paradox. You live in an age of connection, yet you've never felt more misunderstood. Messages travel at the speed of light, strangers can speak to you from the other side of the world, and every passing day promises deeper understanding between human beings. Yet, beneath this illusion of closeness, there is a fracture, a hidden chasm between who you are and how the world perceives you. And here's the unbearable question. What if no one will ever truly know you, not because you lack the right words, but because something deeper, more disturbing, is standing in the way? The more you think about it, the more unsettling it becomes. Is it possible that every human being walks through life slightly estranged from everyone else, trapped in a private universe of thoughts and feelings that can never fully touch another's? What if understanding, true understanding, is not the norm, but the rarest, most fragile miracle of human existence? You replay memories in your mind, moments when you tried to explain what you were going through, only to see it refracted through someone else's assumptions, someone else's worldview. They heard your words but filtered them through their own fears, desires, prejudices, and you wonder, do I even know myself well enough to be understood by others? Or is the failure of understanding not just theirs, but mine too? This thought haunts you late at night. What if misunderstanding isn't a mistake of communication, but a fundamental truth of human existence? Perhaps every interaction is just two shadows reaching out to touch, never quite overlapping, only approximating the truth of one another. The discomfort grows. If this is true, if misunderstanding is not the exception but the rule, what does it mean for love, friendship, intimacy, or even society itself? How many conflicts, heartbreaks, wars, and betrayals stem from this silent impossibility of true understanding? Perhaps the world doesn't run on facts or reason, but on endless projections, people believing they see one another clearly, while living in separate, unbridgeable worlds. And yet, there's something deeper than the pain of being misunderstood. It's the hunger, the craving to be seen as you truly are. The child inside you remembers it vividly, reaching out with a thought, a feeling, a dream, hoping someone would recognize it, validate it, mirror it back to you. But even then, even as a child, you sensed it. Most people aren't really listening, they're just waiting to speak, waiting to project their own story onto yours. Is it possible that the real tragedy is not being misunderstood, but knowing that most people never even try to understand? That the world is a hall of mirrors, everyone talking to reflections of themselves instead of two souls standing in front of them. And here's the paradox that cuts deeper. Sometimes you feel misunderstood, even by yourself. You can't fully articulate what you feel. You can't explain why certain things hurt. You can't make sense of the chaos inside your own head. If you cannot wholly understand yourself, what hope is there that anyone else will? Perhaps the longing for understanding is doomed from the start, not because others fail you, but because you are a mystery to yourself. So you perform. You wear masks. You translate your truth into palatable fragments, versions of yourself that seem more acceptable, hoping that if you dilute the reality of who you are, you might finally be understood. But the cruel irony is that the more you compromise yourself for the sake of understanding, the further you drift from the possibility of being truly known. And now comes the question you've been avoiding, the question that rattles the foundations of everything you believe about connection, love, and identity. What if the reason you always feel misunderstood has nothing to do with words, intelligence, or communication skills, but everything to do with deeper forces shaping human perception, forces buried in the psyche itself, forces that have ruled humanity long before you were born? What if misunderstanding is not just an accident of life, but a symptom of something far more ancient, far more insidious, a flaw in the human condition that no amount of language, empathy, or technology can fully bridge. If this is true, then the problem isn't simply about finding better ways to explain yourself. It's about confronting the unsettling possibility that misunderstanding is woven into the very fabric of existence, and that every relationship you've ever had has been haunted by this silent, invisible barrier. And yet, beneath the despair, another question burns like a flicker of hope. If this barrier exists, can it be broken? Can there be moments, rare and fleeting, when two human beings see each other completely, without distortion, without projection, without masks? The answer lies deeper than you think, buried in psychology, philosophy, and the unexamined forces shaping the human mind. But to reach it, you'll first need to face the hidden problem that has been ruling your interactions all along. Imagine waking up tomorrow with a strange, unshakable thought lodged in your mind. Every conversation you've ever had might have been a lie, not because you intended it to be, but because it was never the whole truth. Not once, not even with the people closest to you, have you spoken the raw, unfiltered essence of who you are. Every word you've uttered has passed through countless filters: fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of what might happen if you really said what you meant. And even when you dared to reveal something real, what reached the other person's mind wasn't your truth, but their version of it. They didn't see you. They saw a story about you. Why does this happen? Why does every attempt at understanding feel like a conversation through a fogged window, with distorted shapes and muffled voices? The answer, as unsettling as it is, doesn't lie in miscommunication, poor listening skills, or lack of empathy. It lies much deeper, in the architecture of the human psyche itself, in forces older than civilization, older than language, older even than reason. The prison of perception. Carl Jung once wrote that every person carries a mask, the persona, a face crafted to meet the expectations of the world. Behind this mask, another self exists, raw, irrational, chaotic, contradictory. But most of the time, you keep that self locked away, not because you wish to lie, but because truth is dangerous. From the moment you were born, you learned that parts of you were unacceptable. Your parents praised you when you were good, scolded you when you were too much. School rewarded obedience, punished strangeness. Slowly, you built a self that could be loved, a version of you that was digestible, predictable, safe. But here's the paradox. The more you built this mask, the more you hid your real self. And the more you hid, the harder it became for anyone to truly know you. Now imagine that every other person is doing the same thing. You are a mask speaking to masks, layers upon layers of performance, a masquerade ball where no one dares remove their disguise. How could understanding ever thrive in such a theater? This is not a surface-level problem. It is existential, tied to the human need to belong versus the human terror of exposure. To be truly understood means to be truly seen, and to be truly seen feels unbearably dangerous, because what if the truth of who you are is met with rejection? So instead of risking the pain of being unseen in your authenticity, you settle for a hollow version of connection. You'd rather be liked for the mask you wear than rejected for the soul you are. The tyranny of projection. Nietzsche once said, "We are unknown to ourselves, we men of knowledge." The meaning is devastating. Not only do others misunderstand you, you misunderstand yourself. When you speak, what you express is already filtered through unconscious biases, hidden wounds, and unexamined desires. You project parts of yourself you cannot face onto others. You think you're seeing them clearly, but you're really staring into a mirror, and they're doing the same to you. Think of the last time someone accused you of something you knew wasn't true. Laziness, selfishness, dishonesty. They were certain they were seeing you accurately, but what if they weren't seeing you at all? What if they were seeing their own shadow, the disowned parts of themselves they couldn't accept, now painted onto your skin? This is what Jung called projection, a relentless force that distorts understanding at its core. Humans don't meet each other as they are. They meet hallucinations of each other. They meet ghosts conjured from their own fears, fantasies, and memories. So every interaction is haunted. You speak, they listen, and the meaning is mutated as it passes through their unhealed wounds and unconscious beliefs. It doesn't matter how precise your words are. Language cannot escape the gravitational pull of projection, the fragmentation of the self. Arthur Schopenhauer believed that human beings are driven not by reason, but by a blind, insatiable force he called the will. Your thoughts, your desires, your personality, all are just surface ripples of this deeper, irrational current pulling you in directions you don't fully understand. What does this mean for being understood? It means you aren't one coherent, stable self. You are fragments, conflicting desires, hidden fears, suppressed rage, forgotten traumas, all bundled into a fragile identity that keeps shifting beneath your own feet. How can anyone understand you when even you are a moving target? When you say, "This is who I am," which part of you is speaking? The wounded child, the ambitious adult, the hidden rebel you keep chained in silence? And worse still, how can others meet you in truth when they, too, are fragmented beings, torn between the person they think they are and the deeper forces they cannot name? The truth is brutal. Understanding is rare because human beings are not transparent, even to themselves. We live inside layers of illusions, masks, and projections. We mistake words for truth, stories for selves, appearances for reality. 4. The great lie of modern society. If these psychological forces weren't enough, modern culture amplifies misunderstanding into a suffocating epidemic. Aldous Huxley foresaw this in Brave New World. A society addicted to comfort and distraction loses the capacity for depth. Today's world celebrates speed, surface impressions, and curated identities. Social media trains you to communicate in fragments and images, not truths. You are rewarded for being likable, not real. Understanding becomes impossible because no one has time or courage to pause and truly listen. Society feeds you a lie. If you just express yourself clearly enough, people will understand you. But how could they, when attention is fleeting, empathy is diluted, and every word you say is instantly swallowed by an ocean of noise and assumptions? And here lies the hidden problem at its core. You were born into a species that is inherently limited in understanding others, and then placed in a culture that makes true understanding nearly impossible. You crave to be seen, but the human mind isn't designed to see clearly. You long to be known, but you live in a world that rewards only the performance of knowing. You try to explain yourself, but every word gets warped by masks, projections, and noise before it reaches another's soul. The result? A gnawing loneliness that no amount of company can cure. A perpetual feeling of being out of sync with the world, like an actor trapped in the wrong play, waiting for someone to notice that the script doesn't match the truth of who you are. And yet, this is only the beginning of the problem. If this misunderstanding stays unchallenged, it doesn't just hurt. It shapes your life in ways you cannot see. It alters your relationships, your choices, even your sense of reality itself. Imagine living in a house where every mirror lies. Each reflection you see is slightly altered, your face elongated, your eyes blurred, your expression twisted into something unfamiliar. At first you tell yourself the distortion is minor, harmless, but over time you forget what you truly look like. You begin to believe the false image staring back at you. This is what it means to live misunderstood. It feels like a passing inconvenience, a social misstep, a gap in communication, but beneath the surface it is corrosive. When every connection is warped by masks, projections, and illusions, misunderstanding seeps into your soul. It doesn't just isolate you, it reshapes you. It rewires your identity, dictates your choices, and blinds you to your own truth. You start to think, maybe it's not them who misunderstands me, maybe it's me, maybe I'm the one who doesn't make sense, and that single thought begins a quiet, devastating transformation. You begin to wear the wrong skin. At first, misunderstanding is just frustrating. A friend assumes your silence is coldness when really it's exhaustion. A parent misreads your ambition as arrogance. A lover mistakes your passion for anger. You tell yourself, they just don't get it, they don't get me. But the mind, fragile and desperate to belong, cannot endure endless dissonance. Over time, you adapt, not by correcting their perception, but by becoming what they expect. Psychologists call this self-concept distortion, the slow bending of your identity to fit the images others project onto you. If people treat you as difficult, you start biting your tongue, making yourself smaller. If they call you selfish, you give until you're empty, just to disprove the accusation. Every misunderstanding plants a seed of doubt, and doubt grows into compliance. You begin to wear masks so often that one day you forget they're masks at all. You've become a stranger to yourself, not because you chose to, but because misunderstanding has been sculpting you like a relentless, invisible artist. And the tragedy is this: no one notices. People don't just misunderstand who you are, they misunderstand who you've become, mistaking your adaptations for authenticity. Relationships become a theater of ghosts. When everyone is misunderstood, relationships become haunted spaces. Two people sit across from each other, believing they are communicating, but in truth, they are talking to phantoms. You speak, but your words are filtered through someone else's fears and biases. They respond, but you hear not what they mean, but what you've learned to fear. It's a dialogue of shadows, a play where no one is truly on stage. This misunderstanding creates false intimacy. People may think they know you because they know your habits, your opinions, your curated expressions, but they don't know the deeper currents beneath. The secret despair, the wordless longings, the unspeakable truths you've locked away because they were never met with understanding before. Dostoevsky once wrote that man is a mystery, and if you spend your entire life trying to solve him, you won't waste a moment. But modern life doesn't have time for mystery. It wants shortcuts, labels, clarity, and in that rush to simplify you, something sacred dies, the possibility of real connection. We live surrounded by people, yet utterly alone, not because we lack company, but because misunderstanding has made us ghosts even in the presence of others. Truth becomes unspeakable. The most dangerous consequence of perpetual misunderstanding is not isolation, it is self-censorship of truth. At some point, after enough failed attempts to be understood, you stop trying. You swallow words before they're spoken. You silence the cries of your deeper self, because what's the point if no one will really hear you? But here's the devastating part. When truth is unspeakable for too long, it begins to rot inside you. It festers, twisting into resentment, depression, even rage. Psychologists have long observed that unexpressed truths often transform into psychological symptoms, anxiety, chronic tension, or addictions that act as substitutes for real understanding. Gabor Mate speaks of addiction as a cry for connection, a way to numb the unbearable pain of emotional isolation. When you live misunderstood long enough, you may seek refuge in distractions, substances, workaholism, anything to dull the ache of never being truly seen. In this way, misunderstanding doesn't just hurt, it becomes a silent architect of suffering. It builds invisible prisons where people wander, yearning for freedom they can no longer name. The world turns into a hall of lies. Over time, the epidemic of misunderstanding seeps beyond personal relationships and infects entire societies. When people no longer risk revealing themselves, the world fills with postures, masks, and half-truths. Look at modern communication. We are drowning in information, yet starved of understanding. Social media rewards oversimplification. Public discourse thrives on outrage, not empathy. Everyone screams to be understood, yet no one truly listens. The collective psyche is fractured, each person trapped in their own projection, shouting at illusions of others rather than engaging with reality. The consequence: we build civilizations on misunderstanding. Policies are crafted from stereotypes, conflicts from misread intentions, ideologies from fear of the other. On a global scale, we repeat the same pattern that wounds us individually, seeing not people, but distorted reflections of them. This is how wars start, how communities crumble, how trust dies. All because misunderstanding, left unchecked, metastasizes into hatred, prejudice, and systemic alienation. You begin to believe the lie. Perhaps the most haunting consequence of betrayal is this: you start misunderstanding yourself. Misunderstanding is not just an external force, it colonizes your mind. Every misinterpretation, every false label you absorb, every projection you accept as truth, weaves itself into your identity. You begin to believe you are the masks you wear. You believe you are the character others mistook you for. You forget the person you were before misunderstanding carved you into a palatable shape. And one day, you may wake up and realize that the greatest tragedy isn't that others never understood you. It's that you don't understand yourself anymore. You've been edited, rewritten, eroded by the silent violence of misinterpretation until the original manuscript of your soul is lost. The quiet horror. This is the true cost of living misunderstood. It's not just loneliness, it's not just frustration, it's existential erasure. A theft of the self so subtle and relentless that you don't even know it's happening until you are already half gone. This is why the feeling of being misunderstood hurts so much. It's not a minor social inconvenience, it's a signal of something deeper. The erosion of authenticity, the death of truth, the loss of real connection in a world that only knows how to perform. And yet, if this is the trap, there must be a way out. But escaping it isn't simple, because to break free, you must first rebel against every instinct you've been trained to follow, every social script, every inherited belief, every fear that keeps you masked and silent. The next step isn't about hoping others will suddenly understand you. It's about learning how to step outside the theater of illusions entirely. It's about reclaiming your truth, even if it terrifies you, even if it costs you everything you thought belonging was. The real question isn't why do they misunderstand me? The real question is, am I willing to risk everything to finally be seen? Imagine standing at the edge of a vast, dark forest. Behind you stretches a familiar wasteland. A life of masks, shallow conversations, distorted reflections of who you are. Ahead lies uncertainty, danger, perhaps even madness. Yet something in you knows that if you wish to reclaim yourself, you must leave the safety of misunderstanding behind. Most people never cross that threshold. They settle for a life of quiet falseness because the alternative, being truly, brutally understood, is terrifying. True understanding demands vulnerability, rebellion, even war against the very fabric of the world you were taught to navigate. Breaking free is not about persuading others to understand you. It's about dismantling the prison of false belonging you've been living in and daring to step outside. The first act of rebellion: stop explaining yourself. From childhood, you were conditioned to justify your existence. Every thought, feeling, and impulse had to be explained to authority figures, teachers, parents, peers, and when you weren't understood, you tried harder, shaping your words, softening your truths, rewriting your story to make it palatable. This is the first chain you must shatter. Stop performing for understanding. Not everyone deserves access to your deepest truths. Not everyone is capable of meeting you there, and every time you over-explain yourself to someone determined to misunderstand you, you reinforce the lie that their perception defines your reality. Rebellion begins with silence, not the silence of suppression, but the silence of sovereignty. You no longer waste your energy convincing blind eyes to see. You begin to reserve your truth for those who've proven worthy of hearing it. This is not arrogance, it's self-preservation. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." You cannot become that if you keep offering fragments of yourself to people who grind them into dust. Unmasking the self you lost, Next rebellion is internal, peeling away the masks you've been wearing for so long that they feel like your skin. Ask yourself, who would I be if no one was watching? What would I want if the world was silent? What truth have I swallowed so deep it's become a lump in my soul? This is not easy. When you first try to reclaim your authentic self, you may find nothing. A hollow silence where identity should be. That's because the true self doesn't scream, it waits. It waits for you to stop performing long enough to hear its whispers. This is shadow work in its purest form. Not the pop psychology version that romanticizes darkness, but the brutal excavation of every memory, wound, and rejected part of you that learned to hide because it wasn't understood. Jung called this individuation, the process of integrating the self that was exiled. It's not about becoming someone new, but remembering who you were before misunderstanding rewrote you. Choosing the fire over the cage. The greatest temptation in life is safety. The second greatest is approval. Most people chain themselves to both, believing that comfort and acceptance are the same as freedom. But as Nietzsche warned, the individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. To be free, you must risk rejection. You must choose the fire of truth over the cage of belonging. This means saying things that make people uncomfortable. It means refusing roles you've outgrown. It means letting go of relationships that only loved the mask, not the person beneath it. This will hurt. There is no rebellion without pain. Every false bond you sever feels like death, because in some way, it is the death of the obedient self you sacrificed to be loved. But beyond that death lies something fierce and luminous, real connection, a life where you are not tolerated but known, where your words aren't twisted into something else, where intimacy doesn't feel like a battlefield. Freedom has a price, but misunderstand. Ding has a greater one, the slow erosion of your soul. You must decide which cost you're willing to bear. Finding the few who see, you cannot break free alone forever. Isolation may cleanse you of false connections, but it cannot sustain you. Eventually, you must seek out the rare, precious few who truly understand. These are not people who agree with everything you say, or who validate you endlessly. True understanding is deeper than affirmation. It is seeing, without distortion, who you are in all your contradictions and complexity. To find these people, you must dare to show yourself unedited. This is the paradox of rebellion. You cannot demand understanding while hiding behind masks. You must risk misunderstanding again, but this time without compromise. Most will still get you wrong, but a few will lean in closer instead of turning away. They will not flinch at your shadows or dilute your truths. These are the souls worth keeping, the ones who make all previous loneliness seem like preparation. Philosopher Martin Buber called this the I-thou relationship, where two beings meet authentically, not as roles or projections, but as naked existence encountering naked existence. That is what you are searching for, not popularity, not validation, but genuine presence. 5. Speaking the forbidden truths, breaking free from misunderstanding is not only personal, it is revolutionary. Every time you speak a truth you were taught to hide, you weaken the empire of illusions society has built. Every time you refuse to conform to projections, you create space for others to do the same. Understanding spreads like fire. When one person dares to be seen, it gives others permission to remove their masks too. Your rebellion can ripple outward, destabilizing the machinery of false belonging that keeps humanity fragmented and afraid. This doesn't mean becoming loud or combative. Sometimes rebellion is quiet, an unwavering refusal to betray your essence. Sometimes it is thunderous, challenging institutions, cultures, and belief systems that thrive on misunderstanding human beings into obedience. Either way, the act of reclaiming yourself is not just survival, it is defiance. It is a declaration that you will not disappear quietly. The leap into the unknown. Freedom doesn't feel safe at first. It feels like walking naked through fire, like tearing pages from the script you've lived by since childhood. You will lose people. You will lose certainty. You may even lose the version of yourself you thought was you. But what you gain is priceless. A self that is whole, a life built on truth, connections forged in understanding rather than illusion. Breaking free is not a single act. It is a continual choice, moment by moment, to choose truth over performance, authenticity over comfort, real connection over shallow acceptance. And as you stand at the threshold of that dark forest, you realize something extraordinary. Misunderstanding was never just a social wound. It was the training ground for your awakening. Every misinterpretation, every false label, every failed attempt to be seen, it was all preparing you for this rebellion, this refusal to vanish into other people's stories about you. The final step awaits, not just freedom, but revelation, because once you have reclaimed your truth, there is a deeper question left unanswered. What if being misunderstood was never the problem? What if the real prison was believing you needed to be understood at all? Imagine this. You've walked through the fire. You've burned the masks, left behind the rooms where you once begged to be understood, and stepped into a life that is raw, unfiltered, uncertain, but finally your own. You stand there, expecting liberation, to feel like lightness, expecting the world to open its arms now that you've reclaimed yourself. But instead, you are met with an even stranger, more unsettling realization. Perhaps you were never meant to be fully understood. Perhaps this whole search was a trap from the start. The illusion of perfect understanding. We grow up believing that being understood is proof that we exist. A parent's nod, a friend's agreement, a lover's reassurance. It feels like validation, like a mirror telling us we are real. But what if this is the grandest illusion of all? No one can fully understand you, not because people are cruel or unempathetic, but because you are infinite, ever-changing, and uncontainable. Every thought you've ever had, every memory that shaped you, every unspoken feeling that lingers like a shadow, these things cannot be transferred perfectly into another mind. Words are clumsy, empathy has limits, and even the closest souls cannot cross the final threshold into your private universe. You are chasing a kind of understanding that cannot exist, because no language can capture the totality of who you are. And yet, you built your self-worth on it. You begged for it, grieved its absence, let it define your loneliness. But the truth is brutal and freeing at once. Perfect understanding is a fantasy, and you don't need it to be whole, too. The great misunderstanding of life. We imagine human connection as the alignment of two minds, a perfect meeting of souls. But in reality, connection is not understanding, it is witnessing. There is a difference. Understanding says, I know exactly what it's like to be you. Witnessing says, I can never fully know, but I see you trying to exist, and I choose to stay. What you craved all along was not someone who could perfectly interpret you, but someone who would not turn away when you were messy, contradictory, or unfathomable. You wanted presence, not translation, and this changes everything. Because once you realize you do not need to be understood to be loved, you stop performing clarity for others. You stop erasing your complexity to fit their comprehension. You stop betraying your mystery for the comfort of being explained. You become free to be seen, not as a solved puzzle, but as the living, shifting paradox you are. Nietzsche once wrote, "One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star." True connection happens not when the chaos is explained away, but when someone dares to dance in it with you. 3. The tyranny of self-understanding, but here lies an even deeper truth, one that slices closer to the bone. Your longing to be understood by others was only a reflection of a more primal longing, the longing to understand yourself. And yet, like others, you cannot fully contain yourself either. You are not a static entity, you are a river, a shifting constellation of memories and desires, traumas and triumphs, flowing toward a horizon you can't see. Trying to pin yourself down, to define yourself, explain yourself, make yourself neatly understood even to you, is a subtle form of violence against your own becoming. You are not a book to be read. You are an unfolding story, written in a language no one has mastered yet. This is why every attempt at self-definition feels like a cage. The more you try to understand yourself completely, the more you amputate the parts that don't fit the story. You misunderstand yourself first, long before anyone else does. And so, the ultimate freedom is not in gaining understanding, but in surrendering it, to stop demanding clarity and instead choose to live fully, even when nothing makes sense. From understanding to communion. There is a different kind of connection available to you, one that does not depend on being understood. It is what philosophers like Martin Buber and Jean-Paul Sartre hinted at, a form of intimacy rooted not in explanation, but in communion. Communion is the meeting of two mysteries without the need to resolve them. It is sitting in silence with someone and feeling profoundly met, even though no words pass between you. It is love that does not require translation. This is rare, terrifying, and sacred. It demands vulnerability without guarantees. It demands that you let go of control, that you stop curating yourself to be understandable, and instead risk being real. Most people never reach this depth because they are too busy explaining themselves to death. But once you stop needing to be understood, you make space for something infinitely greater, to be accepted in your ungraspable entirety. The final liberation. You were misunderstood your whole life, and you thought it meant you were broken. You thought it meant you were unworthy, alien, unloved. But here is the final, most powerful truth. Being misunderstood is not a tragedy. It is a sign of your vastness. You do not fit into the frames others offer because you were never meant to be contained. You do not make perfect sense because life itself doesn't. You do not need to be understood because the deepest truths about you are not meant to be explained. They are meant to be lived. Your task is no longer to chase mirrors that reflect you correctly. Your task is to set yourself ablaze with aliveness, to exist so fully and unapologetically that understanding becomes irrelevant. And paradoxically, the moment you stop grasping for understanding, something miraculous happens. You become easier to meet. People can finally witness you without the distortion of expectation or the pressure of translation. The right souls find you not because they understand you perfectly, but because they recognize the courage of your being. 6. A new way of seeing. Stand still for a moment and feel it. The freedom in no longer seeking permission to exist, the relief of no longer explaining your essence away. You are not misunderstood anymore, because misunderstanding requires a demand for understanding that you no longer make. You have outgrown the entire game. Your life is not a message to be decoded, it is a presence to be felt. Your truth does not need agreement to be real. Your existence does not need comprehension to have meaning. As Schopenhauer once wrote, a man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills. There are forces in you that even you cannot fully understand, and yet they make you who you are. Perhaps this is not a flaw, but a miracle, a reminder that life's depth is not meant to be solved, only experienced. So let the world misunderstand you. Let even you misunderstand yourself sometimes. It doesn't matter anymore. You are no longer trying to be a closed book others can read. You are an infinite sky, and no one, not even you, can map every star. You began this journey believing that being misunderstood was a wound that needed healing. But you end it knowing this. The wound was never misunderstanding. It was the belief that only understanding could make you whole. Now you are free. Free to speak without seeking translation. Free to love without demanding perfect mirrors. Free to live without needing to make sense. Because the truth, the final truth, is this. You were never meant to be understood. You were meant to be felt, witnessed, and fiercely alive.